The ancient clock tower of Blackthorn City struck midnight, its melancholy chime echoing through the fog-shrouded streets. Lord Nathaniel Dracul stood at the tall windows of his private chambers, watching the silver moonlight struggle through the persistent mist. 300 years of existence had taught him patience, yet tonight his fingers drummed restlessly against the cold glass. Behind him, the fire in the hearth cast his elongated shadow across the richly carpeted floor. The flames illuminated the opulent furnishings of his sanctuary, the hand-carved bookshelves lined with leather-bound tomes, the mahogany desk cluttered with correspondence, bearing the wax seals of vampire clans from across the continent, the portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching from gilded frames. "My lord," came a voice from the doorway, "the council's emissaries have arrived." Nathaniel did not turn. "Show them in, Elias." His ancient butler bowed and withdrew. Moments later, the heavy oak doors swung open to admit 3 figures shrouded in ceremonial black cloaks. They moved with the unnatural grace of the undead, their feet making no sound on the floorboards that would have creaked beneath mortal weight. "Lord Dracul," the foremost figure spoke, lowering his hood to reveal a face as pale and cold as moonlight on marble. "The High Council extends its gratitude for your acquiescence in this matter." Nathaniel turned, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight like pools of blood. "Is that what we're calling it, Rothven? I had another word in mind. Coercion, perhaps." Councillor Rothven's thin lips curved in what might have passed for a smile on a less sinister face. "Political necessity knows no gentler terms, I'm afraid. The treaty with the Lycan Dominion must be secured, and the Council has unanimously decided that marriage is the most binding guarantee. And I, as Alpha of the Eastern Territories, have been volunteered for the sacrifice," Nathaniel said, his voice deceptively soft. "How convenient for the Council that I remain unwed after these centuries." The second figure stepped forward, removing her hood to reveal the severe features of Councillor Veronica. "This union will prevent a war that would devastate both our kinds, Lord Dracul. The human world grows more dangerous for us all with each passing decade. Their technologies advance, their numbers swell, and their old fears of our kind are being rekindled by their new entertainment. We cannot afford dissension within the supernatural community." Nathaniel crossed to the sideboard and poured a glass of crimson liquid from a crystal decanter. The rich, metallic scent of blood perfumed the air. "And what of the bride? Has she been informed of her fate, or is she to be presented with this arrangement as a fait accompli as well?" The third councillor, who had remained silent until now, spoke in a rasping voice that suggested great age. "Lady Seraphina Blackwood is aware of her duty to her pack. Unlike some, she understands the concept of sacrifice for the greater good." Nathaniel's glass shattered in his grip, sending shards of crystal and droplets of blood across the polished floor. The councillors did not flinch, though Elias appeared silently with a cloth, then vanished again like a ghost. "Blackwood," Nathaniel whispered, the name falling from his lips like a curse. "You would bind me to the daughter of Alaric Blackwood?" Rothven inclined his head. "The very same. Is there a problem, Lord Dracul?" A bitter laugh escaped Nathaniel's throat. "Only that her father led the raid that slaughtered half my coven during the border wars. Only that her grandfather put my sister's head on a pike as a warning to vampires who dared to hunt in Lycan territory. Ancient history," Veronica dismissed with a wave of her skeletal hand. "The girl cannot be held accountable for the actions of her ancestors. And yet I am to be held accountable for the security of our entire race." Nathaniel snarled, his fangs extending involuntarily with his rising anger. The ancient councillor fixed him with a milky-eyed stare. "You are Alpha. It is not merely your accountability, but your burden and your privilege. Your bloodline has ruled the Eastern Territories since before the Great Revelation. Would you be the first Dracul to place personal grievance above the survival of our kind?" The question hung in the air, like the lingering notes of the clock tower's chime. Nathaniel turned back to the window, wrestling with the fury that threatened to overcome his legendary control. The councillors waited in silence, their immortal patience a tangible force in the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and detached. "When is this ceremony to take place?" "The winter solstice," Rothvan answered promptly. 6 weeks from now. The treaty will be signed at sunset, and the marriage will be conducted at midnight, when both our kinds are at the height of their power. "And where shall I meet this bride?" Nathaniel asked, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "Lady Seraphina will arrive tomorrow evening to begin the formal courtship period, as tradition demands," Veronica said. "Her father's second-in-command will accompany her as chaperone until the wedding." Nathaniel's laugh was as sharp and brittle as the ice forming on the window pane. "A courtship? How quaint! Will there be poetry and flowers as well?" "Mock if you must, Lord Dracul," the ancient councillor rasped, "but the old ways have power. The appearance of a proper union matters as much as the political reality. Both sides must believe in this alliance if it is to hold." With a dismissive gesture, Nathaniel signaled the end of his tolerance for the conversation. "If that is all, councillors, I have preparations to make for my bride's arrival." The 3 figures bowed as one and withdrew from the chamber, their cloaks whispering across the floor like secrets in the dark. When the door closed behind them, Nathaniel allowed the mask of cold indifference to slip from his features. With a roar of rage, he swept the contents of his desk to the floor, ancient books and priceless artifacts crashing against the stone hearth. Elias appeared in the doorway, his expression impassive despite the destruction. "Shall I inform the household of Lady Blackwood's imminent arrival, my lord?" Nathaniel straightened, smoothing the front of his tailored jacket with hands that no longer shook. "Yes, and have the east wing prepared, the rooms facing the forest." A cruel smile twisted his lips. "I want her to hear the wolves howling at night, a reminder of what she's leaving behind." "Very good, my lord," Elias murmured. "And shall I arrange for the traditional welcoming gifts?" "No," Nathaniel said, his voice hardening. "This is a political arrangement, not a love match. She will receive the bare minimum of courtesy required by our station. Nothing more." Elias bowed and departed, leaving Nathaniel alone with his thoughts and the persistent ticking of the mantle clock, counting down the moments until his freedom would be sacrificed on the altar of supernatural politics. Miles away, across the misty moors that separated vampire territory from the ancient forests claimed by the Lycan Pax, Seraphina Blackwood stood beneath the canopy of a massive oak tree, her breath forming small clouds in the chill night air. The moon, nearly full, bathed the clearing in silver light that caught in her long dark hair and glinted off the amulet at her throat. A wolf's head carved from a single piece of obsidian, the symbol of her family's status within the pack hierarchy. "You don't have to go through with this, Sarah." A deep voice rumbled from behind her. She did not turn, knowing without looking that her cousin Ethan had followed her to her secret thinking place. "You know I do, Eth. The council has spoken. Father has agreed." Ethan moved to stand beside her, his massive frame dwarfing her more delicate build. Unlike many of their kind who appeared fully human until the change took them, Ethan always seemed to carry the wolf just beneath his skin. In his amber eyes, the unusual breadth of his shoulders, the predatory grace of his movements. "Your father agreed because he believes this treaty will give him time to rebuild our forces," Ethan growled. "He's thinking like an alpha, not like a father. That bloodsucker is over 3 centuries old, Sarah. They say he's killed more of our kind than any vampire since the Dark Ages." Seraphina sighed, her slim fingers toying with the amulet. "And our ancestors have killed just as many of them. That's why this treaty matters. That's why this marriage matters." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. "A treaty is one thing. Sending you to live among them, to be bound to their alpha—" He broke off, turning away as if he couldn't bear to finish the thought. "I'll still be Lycan," Seraphina said softly. No bond can change what I am inside, and I'll have the solstice visits home. It's not as if I'll never see the pack again. Once a year, Ethan spat, once a year you'll be permitted to return to your family, to run with your own kind, and the rest of the time you'll be surrounded by the undead, sleeping in a fortress of stone and iron, far from the earth and sky. Seraphina had no answer for that. The thought of leaving the forest, of being separated from the wild places where she could run freely beneath the moon, was a physical ache in her chest. But the alternative, continued hostilities that would inevitably lead to open war, was unthinkable. "I leave tomorrow at sunset," she said instead. "Will you come to bid me farewell at least?" Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm to accompany you," he admitted. "Your father has named me your protector during the courtship period." A small smile touched Seraphina's lips. "Then it won't be so terrible after all. I'll have a piece of home with me." Ethan turned back to her, his expression grave. "Sarah, there's something you should know about Dracul, something they probably haven't told you." The seriousness in his tone sent a chill down Seraphina's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn night. "What is it?" "During the border wars, it was your grandfather who led the raid on Dracul's territory, the one where they killed his sister." Seraphina's hand flew to her mouth. "No one told me." "Of course they didn't," Ethan said bitterly. "It might have made you reconsider this sacrifice, but Dracul will know, and vampires have long memories for blood debts." Seraphina felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Not just the history of two supernatural races, but the specific violent history between her family and the man she was to marry. "It doesn't change anything," she said finally. "If anything, it makes the symbolism of our union more powerful. Old enemies becoming allies. Or it makes you the lamb being led to slaughter," Ethan muttered. Before she could respond, a howl rose from the direction of the pack's main compound. A summons. Seraphina straightened her spine, squaring her shoulders beneath her woolen cloak. "That will be father, calling the pack to announce the final arrangements," she said. "We should go." Ethan nodded reluctantly and fell into step beside her as they made their way through the ancient trees. Neither spoke as they walked, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that would begin tomorrow. The compound came into view as they crested a small hill, a collection of stone buildings surrounding a central clearing, the great hall dominating the space with its massive timber frame and peaked roof. Torches blazed in iron brackets, and members of the pack were already gathering, their faces solemn in the flickering light. Alaric Blackwood stood on the steps of the hall, his massive figure instantly recognizable even from a distance. The Alpha's silver-streaked hair was pulled back from his face, highlighting the network of scars that marked his weathered features, battle trophies from decades of defending their territory. His eyes found Seraphina immediately, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "Remember who you are," Ethan murmured as they approached the gathering. "No matter what happens in that place, no matter what he does or says, you are Seraphina Blackwood, daughter of the Alpha, princess of the Western Packs. You are not a peace offering, you are a warrior." Seraphina nodded, drawing strength from his words as she straightened her posture and lifted her chin. Tomorrow, she would enter the lion's den, or rather the vampire's lair. She would face Nathaniel Dracul, the legendary alpha vampire whose name mothers used to frighten disobedient cubs. She would begin the strange dance of a political courtship with a creature who had every reason to hate her and her bloodline. As she took her place beside her father and faced the assembled pack, Seraphina made a silent vow. She would fulfill her duty to her people. She would honor the treaty with dignity and strength, but she would never forget who and what she was. And she would never allow Nathaniel Dracul to break her spirit, no matter how cold his heart or how ancient his grudge. What she could not know, as the moon rose higher over the ancient forest, was that the man who awaited her arrival was making very similar vows of his own. And that fate with its peculiar sense of irony, was preparing to test them both in ways neither could possibly anticipate. The night had settled over Blackthorn City like a funeral shroud by the time the carriage bearing the Lycan delegation crossed the ancient stone bridge marking vampire territory. Serafina watched through the velvet-curtained window as gargoyles loomed from the mist, their stone eyes seeming to follow the procession's progress. Beside her, Ethan sat rigid with tension, his large frame awkwardly contained within the opulent but cramped conveyance. "They certainly have a flair for the dramatic," Serafina murmured, nodding toward the wrought-iron gates ahead, where hooded figures stood with flaming torches. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Theatrics designed to intimidate. Don't let them see your discomfort." "I'm not uncomfortable," she replied, though the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. In truth, every inch of her body yearned to leap from the carriage and run wild through the nearby woods. The wolf inside her recoiled from the unnatural stillness of vampire domain. No birdsong, no scurrying creatures, just the oppressive silence of death. The carriage wheels crunched on the gravel drive as they approached Dracul Manor. The structure loomed against the night sky, a Gothic monstrosity of spires and arched windows, every line of its architecture an assertion of power and permanence. Candlelight flickered in dozens of windows, creating the unsettling impression that the house itself was watching their approach with countless glowing eyes. "Remember," Ethan whispered as the carriage slowed. "Show no fear. They can smell it." Serafina straightened her spine and touched the obsidian wolf pendant at her throat. "I am my father's daughter," she said, more to herself than to him. "I fear nothing that walks in darkness." The carriage door swung open, and an elderly human, no, not entirely human, Serafina realized as she caught his scent, offered a white-gloved hand to assist her descent. "Lady Blackwood," the man intoned with a formal bow, "Lord Dracul awaits your arrival in the Grand Hall. I am Elias, head of the household." Serafina inclined her head with the precise degree of courtesy her station demanded, neither subservient nor haughty. "Thank you, Elias. This is my cousin and protector, Ethan Blackwood." Ethan emerged from the carriage like a bear from hibernation, unfolding to his full, intimidating height. His eyes scanned the surroundings with predatory alertness, taking in the shadows where vampire guards undoubtedly lurked. "Master Blackwood," Elias acknowledged with another bow, seemingly unperturbed by Ethan's imposing presence. "Your quarters have been prepared in the East Wing, adjacent to Lady Blackwood's chambers, as protocol dictates." The butler led them up the grand staircase toward massive double doors, carved with scenes of ancient battles. Serafina kept her expression neutral, though her enhanced vision easily made out the grotesque details. Vampires triumphing over wolf-like creatures, their fangs buried in lupine throats. "Charming decor," Ethan growled under his breath. Elias paused before the doors, his ageless face betraying nothing. "Lord Dracul wishes to inform you that the household observes traditional protocols. The formal introduction will take place now, followed by a welcoming feast. The courtship proper will commence tomorrow evening." With that, he pushed the doors open, and Serafina stepped into a room of opulence and power. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the vaulted ceiling, their light reflected in polished marble floors. Tapestries depicting vampire lore adorned walls panelled in dark wood, and at the far end, seated in what could only be described as a throne, was Lord Nathaniel Dracul himself. Serafina had seen renderings of the vampire Alpha, had heard descriptions, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of his presence. He was beautiful in the way that deadly things often are, sharp-edged and dangerous, his features carved from marble by a sculptor obsessed with perfection. His dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, framing a face that hadn't aged in centuries. But it was his eyes that truly betrayed his inhumanity, ancient, cold, and filled with knowledge no mortal mind should possess. As she approached, flanked by Ethan's protective bulk, Nathaniel rose to his feet in one fluid motion. He wore formal attire, a tailored black suit that accentuated his lean strength with a blood-red cravat at his throat. Not a single embellishment adorned his person, yet he exuded an air of authority that made everyone else in the room seem insignificant by comparison. "Lady Seraphina Blackwood," he said, his voice a velvet caress that belied the ice in his gaze. "Welcome to my home." Seraphina executed a perfect curtsy, just deep enough to acknowledge his position without surrendering her own dignity. "Lord Dracul, I thank you for your hospitality." His lips curved in what might have been a smile on any other face, but held no warmth on his. Hospitality freely given, though not freely chosen, it seems. His gaze flickered to Ethan, hardening imperceptibly. "And this must be your watchdog." Ethan bristled visibly, but Seraphina laid a restraining hand on his arm. "My cousin and appointed chaperone, Ethan Blackwood, son of my father's brother and third in line to alpha succession of the Western Pacts." Nathaniel inclined his head in the barest acknowledgement. "How fortunate for us all that your father spared such an important member of your pack for this duty." One might almost think he was sending a statement rather than a chaperone. Before Ethan could respond to the veiled insult, Nathaniel gestured toward a long table set with crystal and silver. "But where are my manners? You must be famished after your journey. Please be seated. We have prepared refreshments suited to your particular dietary requirements." Seraphina moved toward the table with practiced grace, though her every instinct screamed warnings. The room held at least a dozen vampires, positioned strategically around the perimeter, all watching her with expressions ranging from open curiosity to barely concealed hostility. "You are most considerate, my lord," she said, as a servant pulled out her chair. "Though I confess surprise at your attention to such details." Nathaniel took his place at the head of the table, close enough that Seraphina could detect his unique scent, something ancient and cold, like stone crypts and winter mountains. "Details matter in diplomacy, Lady Blackwood, especially when one is entertaining natural enemies." The emphasis he placed on those two words hung in the air between them like a gauntlet thrown. Seraphina met his gaze without flinching. "Ancestral enemies, perhaps," she countered smoothly. "But nature itself makes no such distinctions. We are all creatures of the night, after all." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossed Nathaniel's face before the mask of cold indifference slipped back into place. "Poetically put, my lady, but centuries of bloodshed suggest otherwise." "Centuries which we now have an opportunity to put behind us," Seraphina said, accepting a goblet of deep red liquid from a server. She sniffed it delicately. "Spiced wine, not blood, thankfully." "Indeed," Nathaniel replied, raising his own goblet in a mockery of a toast. "To new beginnings forced upon us by political necessity." Servants glided forward, placing platters of rare meat before Seraphina and Ethan, while serving ornate crystal glasses of what could only be blood to Nathaniel and the other vampires present. The symbolism was not lost on Seraphina. Separate meals, separate species, forcibly united at one table. "I understand congratulations are in order, Lord Dracul," Ethan spoke up, his deep voice carrying easily through the hall. "I hear the Eastern Territory has expanded significantly under your rule, particularly into what was once considered neutral hunting ground." Nathaniel's eyes flashed with dangerous amusement. "Just as the Western Pacts have been remarkably aggressive in claiming disputed territories along the southern border. Fascinating how we all seek to strengthen our positions before this alliance." Seraphina cut a precise piece of meat, her movements deliberately calm, despite the tension crackling between the two men. "Perhaps we might save territorial disputes for the treaty negotiations? This evening is meant for introductions, is it not?" "As you wish, my lady," Nathaniel conceded with a mocking inclination of his head. "Though I fear we shall soon exhaust the limited topics considered suitable for mixed company. The weather, perhaps?" It's been particularly foggy this season. Excellent for hunting, wouldn't you agree? The threat underlying his words was unmistakable. Ethan's hand tightened on his knife, but Seraphina merely smiled, a predator's smile that displayed just the edge of her own sharp canines. "I've always preferred clarity myself, Lord Dracul, in weather, in purpose, in communication." She set down her utensils and met his gaze directly. "Shall we dispense with the pretense? You resent this arrangement. You resent my presence in your home. You resent, most of all, that it is a Blackwood to whom you must bind yourself for political gain." A hushed silence fell over the hall. Even the servants froze in place, clearly unaccustomed to anyone addressing their master so boldly. Nathaniel's expression remained impassive, but something dangerous kindled in the depths of his eyes. "Directness," he said softly. "How characteristically canine. Your kind never developed the art of subtlety, did they? Just as yours never mastered the virtue of sincerity," she countered. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the table, two predators sizing up their opponent. Then, astonishingly, Nathaniel laughed, a low, rich sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Well played, Lady Blackwood." He raised his glass again, this time with what appeared to be genuine acknowledgement. "Perhaps this arrangement will prove more interesting than I anticipated." The meal proceeded with less overt hostility after that, though the underlying tension never dissipated. As servants cleared the final course, Elias reappeared at Nathaniel's side, bending to whisper something in his master's ear. Nathaniel's expression darkened momentarily before he composed himself. "It appears we have an unexpected situation requiring my attention," he announced, rising to his feet. "Elias will show you to your chambers. We shall continue our courtship tomorrow evening with the traditional exchange of gifts." Seraphina stood as protocol demanded. "Of course, my lord. I look forward to it." Nathaniel moved around the table to stand before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. In a gesture that startled everyone present, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles that was so light she barely felt it. Yet somehow it sent a shiver racing up her spine. "Until tomorrow, Lady Blackwood," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sleep well if you can." With that parting shot, he strode from the hall, several of his lieutenants falling into step behind him. Seraphina became acutely aware of Ethan beside her, practically vibrating with protective anger. "I don't trust him," Ethan growled once they were alone in the corridor, following Elias toward the east wing. "You're not supposed to trust him," Seraphina replied quietly. "That's rather the point of this exercise, building trust where none exists." Elias led them through a maze of corridors, finally stopping before a set of ornate doors. "Your chambers, Lady Blackwood. Master Blackwood will be just across the hall. Should you require anything during your stay, pull the bell cord beside the fireplace." The rooms were sumptuous, if decidedly Gothic in their appointments. Heavy velvet draperies, antique furniture, and a massive four-poster bed dominating the center of the bedroom. But it was the view that caught Seraphina's attention as she moved to the window. The east wing overlooked the dense forest that surrounded Dracul Manor, a deliberate choice that could be interpreted two ways: thoughtful accommodation of her nature, or cruel reminder of what she was giving up. "He's trying to intimidate you," Ethan said, coming to stand beside her as Elias discreetly withdrew. "Giving you a room where you can hear your kin, but not join them." Seraphina traced a finger along the cold glass. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he's simply acknowledging what I am. Don't make excuses for him, Sarah. I saw how he looked at you, like you were both beneath him and of interest to him. It's dangerous." She turned away from the window. "Everything about this situation is dangerous, Eth. But I won't cower in corners or assume the worst of every gesture. That's no way to build peace." Ethan looked as though he wanted to argue further, but instead sighed heavily. "I'll be right across the hall if you need me. Don't trust the servants, and for moon's sake, lock your door." After he'd gone, Seraphina explored her new domain, noting with grudging appreciation the details that had been attended to: fresh flowers that didn't overwhelm her sensitive nose, linens free of the chemical scents humans typically used, even a selection of books that included several rare volumes on lichen history. She was examining these when a soft knock came at her door. Cautiously, she opened it to find a young woman, human by her scent, curtsying respectfully. "Begging your pardon, Lady Blackwood. I'm Lily, assigned as your lady's maid during your stay." The girl kept her eyes downcast, but Seraphina could sense her curiosity. "I've come to help you prepare for the night, if it pleases you." Seraphina hesitated. Among the pack, she had never required such assistance, but she recognized the political wisdom in accepting the household's customs. "Thank you, Lily. Please come in." As the maid helped her change into a silk nightgown and brushed out her long hair before the fire, Seraphina gently probed for information. "Have you served in Lord Dracul's household long, Lily?" "All my life, my lady. My mother served here before me, and her mother before that." Pride tinged the girl's voice. "The Dracul family has protected our bloodline for generations." "Protected?" Seraphina asked carefully. Lily's hands paused briefly in their rhythmic brushing. "My great-grandmother was to be burned as a witch in the village. Lord Dracul's father intervened, brought her to the manor for safety. Our family has served loyally ever since." "And Lord Nathaniel, is he a good master?" Seraphina kept her tone casually curious. Lily resumed brushing, her movements more measured. "Lord Nathaniel is fair, my lady, strict, but never cruel to those who serve well. He has educated many of us beyond what would be possible in the village. My brother studies medicine under his patronage." This information didn't align with the ruthless reputation Nathaniel cultivated among supernatural circles. Seraphina filed it away for later consideration. "There," Lily said, setting down the brush. "Is there anything else you require before retiring?" "No, thank you, Lily. You may go." After the maid departed, Seraphina found herself too restless for sleep. The wolf inside her paced anxiously, unsettled by the strange surroundings and the lingering scents of vampire throughout the chamber. On impulse, she unlatched the window and pushed it open, letting the crisp night air flood the room. The sound came immediately, a long, mournful howl from the distant forest, answered by several others, the chorus of her kind, calling to each other beneath the waxing moon, calling to her. Tears stung her eyes as she leaned out the window, inhaling deeply of the wild scents carried on the breeze. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine shifting form and leaping from the window, racing through the darkness to join her kin in their midnight hunt. "They call to welcome you home, not to lure you away from duty," came a voice from behind her. Seraphina whirled around, heart pounding. Nathaniel stood in the shadows near her chamber door, his presence so quiet she hadn't detected his entrance. In the moonlight, he looked more otherworldly than ever, his pale skin luminescent against the darkness of his attire. "You should not be here," she said, instinctively reaching for the robe draped across a nearby chair to cover her nightgown. "It violates the terms of our courtship agreement." "So formal," he mused, making no move to approach her. "And yet a moment ago you contemplated violating those same terms by shifting form and abandoning your post." Seraphina stiffened. "I contemplated no such thing." "Didn't you?" His smile held no warmth. "I've observed lichens for centuries, Lady Blackwood. I know the look of the beast straining at its human cage." "Then you should also know the difference between contemplation and action," she retorted. "I remain here, as duty demands." Nathaniel inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Indeed you do, more steadfast than I expected from Alaric's daughter. You speak as if you know my father," Seraphina said carefully. "I've known 3 generations of Blackwood Alphas," Nathaniel replied, his voice taking on a distant quality. "I watched your grandfather cut down my sister. I faced your father across battlefields during the border wars." His eyes refocused on her with unsettling intensity. "And now I find his daughter in my home, offered as a token of peace. Serafina lifted her chin. I was not offered, Lord Dracul. I chose this path as you did. Did you? He moved closer, his movements fluid as water. Or were you raised from birth to sacrifice for your pack, as all alpha children are? The only difference is what form the sacrifice takes. There was something in his tone, not mockery, but a strange sort of understanding that caught Serafina off guard. Before she could respond, he was at the window beside her, looking out at the dark forest. I had these chambers prepared for you specifically, he said. Ethan believes it was to torment you with what you've lost. Perhaps it was. But perhaps I simply recognized that cutting you off completely from your nature would be unnecessarily cruel. Serafina studied his profile, trying to reconcile this moment of apparent consideration with the calculating cruelty he had displayed at dinner. Why are you really here, Lord Dracul? He turned to face her, close enough now that she could see the faint red rim around his irises, a sign that he had fed recently. To satisfy my curiosity, the council presents you as a dutiful daughter, accepting this match with noble resignation. Yet tonight you challenge me openly, without fear. I was raised to believe that respect must be earned, not demanded, she said simply. Even from enemies? Especially from enemies. Serafina met his gaze steadily. Fear is not respect, Lord Dracul. You of all people should understand the difference. Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or reluctant admiration. Then his expression closed again, becoming the imperious mask she was beginning to recognize as his public face. The formal gift exchange will take place at sunset tomorrow, he said, abruptly changing the subject. Traditional protocol would have you present something representing your pack's strength, while I offer a token of the protection my household will provide. I'm familiar with the tradition, Serafina replied. Are you also familiar with the blood rite that traditionally follows? His voice dropped lower, taking on a dangerous edge. The sampling of each other's essence to symbolize the beginning of our bond. Serafina's pulse quickened involuntarily. The blood rite was ancient, dating back to the earliest peace accords between their kinds, a symbolic exchange meant to create temporary empathic awareness between participants. I am, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden dryness of her mouth. Nathaniel's eyes darkened as he caught the subtle acceleration of her heartbeat. Are you afraid, little wolf? Not of you, she replied with more confidence than she felt. His laugh was soft and without humor. Then you are either very brave or very foolish. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. Rest well, Lady Blackwood. Tomorrow begins our courtship in earnest, and I suspect you'll need all your strength to endure it. The door closed silently behind him, leaving Serafina alone with the cool night breeze and the distant howling of wolves. Only then did she realize she was trembling, not with fear, but with a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't begin to untangle. Anger at his presumption, wariness of his motives, and beneath it all an unsettling current of curiosity. What game was Nathaniel Dracul playing? The calculated cruelty at dinner, followed by this almost intimate midnight conversation. The deliberate provocations, yet the thoughtful accommodation of her nature. As she closed the window and turned back to her bed, Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that she had glimpsed something beneath the vampire lord's carefully constructed facade. Something unexpected, and potentially far more dangerous than his legendary ruthlessness. Tomorrow would bring the blood rite, the first true test of their enforced intimacy. As she slipped beneath the silk sheets, Serafina's last thought before sleep claimed her was a troubling question. In the ancient ritual of blood exchange, what secrets might Nathaniel Dracul discover about her? And what might she learn about him? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Blackthorn City, Serafina stood before the ornate mirror in her chambers, studying her reflection with critical eyes. The gown provided for the gift exchange ceremony was a masterpiece of vampire craftsmanship, midnight blue silk embroidered with silver threads that caught the candlelight like stars, the cut both modest and alluring with its high collar and form-fitting silhouette. "You look like one of them," Ethan remarked from the doorway, disapproval heavy in his voice. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Serafina replied, smoothing a hand over the unfamiliar fabric. "A visible symbol of our worlds merging." Ethan crossed the room to stand behind her, his reflection dwarfing hers in the mirror. "I heard him enter your chambers last night." Serafina met his eyes in the glass. "He wished to discuss the ceremony. In your bedchamber? After midnight?" Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. "He violates protocol already, testing boundaries to see what he can get away with." "I handled it," she said firmly, turning to face her cousin. From the leather pouch at her side, she withdrew a small wooden box carved with the Blackwood crest. "Is everything prepared for the exchange?" Ethan nodded reluctantly. "The pack's gift arrived at dawn. It awaits you in the Great Hall." A soft knock interrupted them. Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes downcast as always. "My lady, Lord Dracul requests your presence. The guests have assembled." Serafina took a steadying breath. "Very well." The walk to the Great Hall felt longer tonight, each step carrying her closer to the ceremony that would officially begin her binding to Nathaniel Dracul. Servants lined the corridors, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness as she passed. The hall had been transformed since the previous evening. Hundreds of candles cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, vampire nobles in their finery on one side, a small delegation of Lycan representatives on the other, the division between them as clear as a line drawn in sand. At the far end stood Nathaniel, resplendent in formal attire, the blood red of his vest the only color against the severe black of his suit. Silence fell as Serafina entered, all eyes turning to assess the Lycan bride. She kept her gaze fixed on Nathaniel, ignoring the whispers that followed her progress. His expression remained impassive, though something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance, something that might have been approval in any other man. "Lady Blackwood," he greeted her with a formal bow, "you honor us with your presence." "Lord Dracul," she returned, executing a perfect curtsy. "I come as promised, to fulfill my part in our arrangement." A ghost of a smile touched his lips at her choice of words. "Indeed, shall we proceed?" At his signal, the assembled guests formed a circle around them, vampire and Lycan alike joining in the ancient ritual, despite their mutual distrust. An elderly vampire stepped forward, his withered features marking him as one of the eldest present. "For 1,000 years," the elder intoned, "our kinds have warred and reconciled, only to war again. Tonight we witness the most sacred form of treaty, a binding of blood and oath between alpha lines." He gestured toward a small altar that had been placed at the center of the circle. "The exchange of gifts will commence. Lord Dracul, as host, you may begin." Nathaniel turned to a servant who approached bearing a velvet cushion. Upon it rested a necklace that drew gasps from even the most stoic observers. A cascade of diamonds and sapphires set in white gold, centered around a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "Lady Blackwood," Nathaniel said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I offer you this token, crafted from stones mined from the deepest reaches of Dracul territory. The diamonds represent endurance, the sapphires loyalty. The moon," here he paused, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity, "the moon represents acknowledgement of your nature, which shall not be denied within our union." Murmurs rippled through the vampire contingent at this unprecedented concession. Serafina stepped forward, allowing Nathaniel to fasten the necklace around her throat. His fingers brushed against her skin, cool as marble, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "I accept this gift," she said formally, "and the intent behind it." The elder nodded in approval. "Lady Blackwood, you may now present your offering." Ethan stepped forward, unwrapping a bundle of crimson cloth to reveal a gleaming silver dagger. The hilt was fashioned from polished moonstone, the blade etched with ancient Lycan symbols. Seraphina took the weapon reverently. "Lord Dracul, the Blackwood Pack offers this blade, forged in moonfire by our greatest artisans. The silver represents purity of purpose, the moonstone clarity of vision." She extended it toward him, hilt first. "It is said that no falsehood can be spoken over such a blade, nor any oath broken that is sworn upon it." Nathaniel accepted the dagger, examining it with genuine appreciation before securing it at his waist. "A thoughtful gift, my lady. I shall treasure it." The elder raised his hands. The material exchange is complete. Now comes the binding of blood. A hush fell over the assembly as a servant approached with a crystal goblet. Seraphina felt tension radiating from Ethan, sensed the discomfort of her packmates witnessing this intimate ritual. "The blood rite," the elder explained, "creates a temporary bond between participants. For 7 days and 7 nights, each will sense the other's strongest emotions, creating understanding where there was division." He turned to Nathaniel. "Lord Dracul, you will commence." Nathaniel drew the gifted dagger from his belt, its blade catching the candlelight. With deliberate movements, he drew the edge across his palm, allowing crimson drops to fall into the goblet. When he offered the blade to Seraphina, their eyes met in silent communication. Taking the dagger, she repeated the gesture without hesitation, adding her blood to his in the crystal vessel. The elder took the goblet, swirling its contents while murmuring words in an ancient tongue. "Drink," he commanded, offering the goblet first to Nathaniel. The vampire lord accepted it, his eyes never leaving Seraphina's as he raised it to his lips and drank. Something dark and hungry flashed across his features at the taste of her blood, a primal reaction he couldn't quite conceal. When he passed the goblet to Seraphina, his fingers brushed hers intentionally. She steeled herself before drinking, expecting the coppery tang of blood. Instead, she tasted something far more complex. Ancient power, cold nights, and beneath it all an unexpected current of loneliness so profound it momentarily stole her breath. The effect was immediate. Warmth spread through her veins, followed by a strange doubling of her senses, as though she suddenly occupied 2 bodies at once. She could feel Nathaniel's surprise mirroring her own as the connection solidified between them. "It is done," the elder proclaimed. "For 7 days, your essences are joined. May this union bring understanding where there was ignorance and peace where there was strife." The formal ceremony concluded, giving way to the celebratory feast that followed. Seraphina found herself seated beside Nathaniel, acutely aware of his presence in a way that transcended physical proximity. Through their new connection, she sensed his carefully controlled emotions, wariness, curiosity, and something deeper she couldn't quite identify. "You feel it," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Yes," she admitted, discomforted by the intimacy of their shared awareness. "Is it always this intense?" A shadow of amusement crossed his features. "I wouldn't know. This is my first blood bond." Seraphina looked at him in surprise. "But surely, in 3 centuries, I've never had reason to trust anyone enough for such a connection," he replied simply. "Until political necessity demanded it." Throughout the meal, Seraphina became increasingly aware of fluctuations in Nathaniel's emotions, particularly when certain vampires approached to offer congratulations. Toward some, she sensed genuine regard. Toward others, a cold calculation that made her skin crawl. "Your cousin disapproves of our bond," Nathaniel observed, nodding toward Ethan, who watched them with barely concealed hostility from across the room. "He's protective," Seraphina replied. "He's in love with you," Nathaniel countered, his certainty flowing through their connection. Seraphina nearly choked on her wine. "That's absurd. Ethan is family, not by blood," Nathaniel said. "Your father adopted him after the border wars claimed his parents. Did you not know?" The revelation stunned her. "How could you possibly know that?" Nathaniel's smile held no warmth. "Know thy enemy, Lady Blackwood. I've made it my business to understand the Blackwood lineage in intimate detail. Before she could respond, a commotion at the entrance to the great hall drew their attention. A vampire Seraphina hadn't seen before strode purposefully toward them, his clothing dusty from travel. "My lord," the newcomer said, bowing hastily to Nathaniel, "forgive the intrusion, but I bring urgent news from the Northern Territories." Nathaniel's emotions shifted instantly, concern, alertness, and a flash of something like fear bleeding through their connection. "Speak freely, Victor. The Moroi have crossed the boundary line. 3 villages burned. They left survivors this time, with messages for you." A collective gasp ran through the assembly. Seraphina felt Nathaniel's anger rise like a tidal wave, nearly drowning out her own thoughts. "What message?" he demanded, his voice deadly quiet. Victor hesitated, his eyes darting toward Seraphina. "They said, 'Blood treaties cannot save you. The Old One comes for what is his.'" Nathaniel rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "Council members will convene in my study immediately. Victor, gather intelligence reports from all border outposts." His gaze swept the room, landing finally on Seraphina. "Lady Blackwood, I must attend to this matter." She stood as well, sensing his conflict through their bond. "These Moroi, they're the rogue vampire faction from the north. This is not your concern," he said curtly. Seraphina bristled. "If we are to be allied, your enemies become mine as well. The treaty is not yet signed," Nathaniel cut her off, though she sensed it wasn't anger driving his dismissal, but something more complex, a desire to protect her from information he deemed dangerous. "Take the lady to her chambers," he instructed Elias. "Double the guard throughout the manor. No one enters or leaves without my express permission." As he strode from the hall, Seraphina felt his emotions recede like a tide pulling away from shore, not severing their connection, but deliberately muting it. The abrupt withdrawal left her feeling strangely bereft. "What are the Moroi?" she asked Ethan as they were escorted back to the East Wing, guards following at a discreet distance. "Ancient vampire sect," he replied grimly. "Exiled centuries ago for practicing blood magic and consorting with demons. There were rumors they'd returned, but nothing confirmed until now." Seraphina frowned. "And the Old One?" Ethan's expression darkened further. "A name spoken only in whispers among our kind. The progenitor of the vampire bloodlines, said to have been destroyed during the Great Purge. If the Moroi serve him..." He didn't need to finish the thought. War was coming. Not just the territorial skirmishes that had characterized relations between vampires and lichens, but something far more devastating. Back in her chambers, Seraphina found herself too restless for sleep. The blood bond hummed in her veins, carrying echoes of Nathaniel's turbulent emotions, despite his attempt to shield her. Fear, rage, and beneath it all, a driving determination she hadn't expected. On impulse, she unlocked the ornate wooden box she'd brought from home, removing a small leather-bound journal. Her mother's grimoire, passed down through generations of Blackwood females, contained knowledge of lichen magic rarely shared outside the pack. Seraphina flipped through the pages until she found what she sought. A ritual for enhancing blood bonds, allowing the participants to communicate across distances. It was dangerous magic, forbidden by the Treaty of Moonfall except in times of great need, but something told her such times approached rapidly. Drawing a silver knife from her belongings, she pricked her finger and let 3 drops of blood fall onto the page while whispering the ancient words. The blood sizzled against the parchment, then disappeared as the magic took hold. "Nathaniel," she whispered, closing her eyes and focusing on their connection. "I know you can feel me. Speak to me." For long moments nothing happened, then suddenly his presence flooded her mind, sharp with surprise and something like anger. "What have you done?" His voice resonated in her thoughts, clear as if he stood beside her. "Enhanced our connection," she replied silently. "We need to talk, and I suspected you wouldn't come to me willingly." She felt his frustration, followed by grudging respect. "Blood magic, Lady Blackwood? Your kind always claimed to abhor such practices. Desperate times, she countered. The Moroi threat concerns both our peoples. Tell me what's happening. There was a long pause, during which she sensed him weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, his mental voice returned, tinged with resignation. The Moroi serve a being known as Lazarus, the first vampire, from whom all bloodlines descend. He was my sire's sire, ancient beyond reckoning. We believed him destroyed centuries ago, but it seems he merely slumbered, gathering strength. And now he returns, Serafina said. Why? What does he want? Through their connection, she felt Nathaniel's hesitation, sensed him concealing something significant. Nathaniel, she pressed, if we're to face this together, he wants you, Nathaniel interrupted, his mental voice razor-sharp with sudden intensity. Or rather, what you carry. The Blackwood blood harbors an ancient power, one your kind has forgotten, but which Lazarus remembers well. Shock rippled through Serafina. What power? What are you talking about? Again that hesitation then. Come to my study. Bring no one, not even your cousin. Use the servants' passage behind the tapestry in your chambers. It will lead you directly there. We have much to discuss, and little time. The connection dimmed as he withdrew slightly, though the bond remained intact. Serafina sat motionless, her mind reeling from the implications of what she'd learned. The Blackwood bloodline harbored some power unknown even to those who carried it, a power significant enough that an ancient vampire would emerge from centuries of slumber to claim it. Her gaze fell on her mother's grimoire, its pages suddenly seeming more mysterious than familiar. How much of her heritage remained hidden from her? And more troubling still, how much did Nathaniel Dracul know about her bloodline that she herself did not? Rising from her bed, Serafina changed into a simple dark gown and secured a silver dagger at her hip. Whatever revelations awaited in Nathaniel's study, she would face them armed with both courage and caution. The fate of two races might hang in the balance, and the uneasy alliance with her vampire betrothed had suddenly become far more complicated than a mere political arrangement. As she located the hidden passage behind the tapestry, one question burned in her mind. If Nathaniel had known about this power in her bloodline all along, what else might he be keeping from her? And more importantly, was the arranged marriage truly about peace between their kinds? Or had it always been about gaining control of whatever ancient magic flowed through Blackwood veins? The passage behind the tapestry spiraled downward, illuminated only by occasional wall sconces, casting eerie shadows that seemed to follow Serafina's progress. The stone beneath her fingers was ancient, worn smooth by centuries of secret movements through Dracul Manor. Through their blood bond, she could sense Nathaniel's presence growing stronger with each step, his anticipation, his wariness, and beneath it all, a curious emotion that felt almost like hope. The passage ended at a heavy oak door. Taking a steadying breath, Serafina pushed it open to reveal Nathaniel's private study, a vast chamber lined with bookshelves reaching to the vaulted ceiling. Maps covered one wall, marked with red pins that she immediately recognized as Moroi incursion points. Nathaniel stood before a roaring fire, his tall figure silhouetted against the flames, hands clasped behind his back. "You came alone," he observed without turning. "Wiser than I expected." "Wisdom has nothing to do with it," Serafina replied, closing the door behind her. "I want answers, not protection." He turned then, his eyes reflecting the firelight like polished garnets. "And if the answers are more dangerous than you anticipate?" "I've spent my life being told half-truths about my heritage," she said, moving deeper into the room. "I'd rather face a dangerous truth than continue living within comfortable lies." Something like respect flickered across his features. He gestured to an ancient tome open on his desk. The Codex Sanguinis, written by Lazarus himself before his supposed destruction. "My family has guarded it for centuries." Serafina approached cautiously. The book emanated a strange energy she could feel prickling along her skin. Its pages were made of some material she couldn't identify, not paper, not parchment, but something that seemed to pulse with inner life. "What does it say about my bloodline?" she asked, not touching the ominous volume. Nathaniel's fingers traced words written in a language she didn't recognize. Before vampires, before lichens, there existed a race of beings who walked between worlds, the Custodes Portarum, the gatekeepers. They alone could open passages between our realm and others, controlling what entities could cross the threshold. What does this have to do with me? When the Custodes died out, their powers dispersed among certain human bloodlines. His eyes met hers. The Blackwoods were one such bloodline, but unlike others, your ancestors didn't lose the ability through dilution. They became something new when they acquired the lycanthropic gift. The power went dormant, buried beneath the wolf's magic. Serafina stared at him in disbelief. "You're saying my family can open doorways between worlds?" "Not precisely. The power requires activation, a specific ritual at the nexus of vampire and lichen bloodlines." His voice lowered. "A ritual Lazarus designed centuries ago, involving the sacrifice of a gatekeeper descendant at the moment of transformation." Horror washed over her. "That's why you agreed to this marriage. Not for peace. You wanted access to my blood." "Initially, yes," Nathaniel admitted, his honesty flowing through their bond. "When the council proposed the marriage, I saw an opportunity to secure a Blackwood for study, to confirm the legends in the Codex." "And now," Serafina demanded, her hand moving instinctively to the dagger at her hip, "now I understand why Lazarus has returned." Nathaniel moved around the desk toward her, his movements deliberately slow. "He doesn't merely seek gatekeeper blood. He needs a willing vessel. A Blackwood who has undergone the blood bond with a vampire of the original lineage." Understanding dawned with terrifying clarity. "Someone like me." "The blood rite we performed tonight," Nathaniel's voice tightened with self-recrimination. "I unwittingly completed the first stage of his ritual. When Victor delivered that message, I realized what game Lazarus has been playing. He manipulated the council into arranging our marriage." Serafina whispered. "The council, your father, all of us, pawns in his centuries-long strategy." Nathaniel's hands clenched at his sides. "If he captures you now, while our blood bond is active, he can complete the ritual during the solstice. The barrier between worlds will fall, and whatever entity he serves will enter our realm." Through their connection, Serafina sensed no deception, only a burning determination that matched her growing resolve. "Then we must prevent that from happening." "Yes," he agreed, surprising her with the intensity of his conviction. "Which is why you must leave Blackthorn City tonight. Return to your packlands where my blood cannot be traced to you. Break the connection before Lazarus can exploit it." "Run and hide?" Serafina's lip curled in disdain. "That's your solution? It's the only way to ensure—" "It ensures nothing except delaying the inevitable," she interrupted. "Lazarus will find another Blackwood, another vampire. The threat remains." Nathaniel stepped closer, frustration radiating through their bond. "What would you suggest?" "Confronting an ancient vampire who has existed for millennia, who commands powers neither of us fully comprehends." Serafina's gaze fell on the Codex. "I suggest we use what he wants against him. The blood bond works both ways, doesn't it? If he can use our connection to channel power, so can we." "What you're suggesting is madness," Nathaniel said, though she felt his reluctant intrigue. "Perhaps." She placed her hand on the ancient book, ignoring the unnatural warmth that seeped through her palm. "But I'd rather face him with the full knowledge of what I am than spend my life running from shadows." For a long moment, Nathaniel studied her, his emotions too complex for her to fully decipher through their bond. Then, with a decisive movement, he pulled another book from a hidden compartment in his desk. "My father's journal," he explained, laying it beside the Codex. "He spent decades researching the gatekeeper bloodlines, including experiments that—" he hesitated, "experiments that cost many lives." Including Blackwood lives? Serafina asked quietly. Yes. Nathaniel met her gaze unflinchingly. The border wars weren't entirely about territory. My father sought Blackwood blood for his research. Your grandfather discovered his true purpose and retaliated against our coven. The weight of this revelation settled over Serafina, generations of hatred and violence, stemming not from natural enmity between species, but from a vampire's obsession with power hidden in lichen veins. And you? She asked. Did you continue his work? I abandoned it after his death, Nathaniel replied, until the council proposed our marriage and old temptations resurfaced. Through their bond, she sensed his conflict, ambition warring with something newer, something that had taken root during their brief acquaintance. But now you would help me defy Lazarus instead of exploiting this power yourself, she observed. Why? Nathaniel turned away, moving back toward the fire. Because I've seen what obsession with such power did to my father, to our peoples, and because he stopped, an unfamiliar emotion flooding their connection before he could suppress it. Because, Serafina prompted, stepping closer to him. Because I begin to think that perhaps there are things more valuable than power, he admitted reluctantly. The peace this marriage was meant to create, true peace, not built on exploitation, might be worth pursuing for its own sake. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted somewhere in the manor. Shouts, the clash of weapons, the distinctive snarls of lichens in battle form. "They're here!" Nathaniel said grimly, moving swiftly to a cabinet and withdrawing an ornate sword. "Sooner than I expected." Serafina closed her eyes, focusing on the sounds. "That's Ethan. He's fighting. And those aren't just Moroi." Her eyes flew open. "There are traitors in both our camps," Nathaniel nodded. "Lazarus would have planted agents long ago, waiting for this moment." He tossed her a blade from his collection. "Can you use this?" The sword was lighter than it appeared, perfectly balanced for her grip. "My father didn't raise me to be defenseless." A crash reverberated through the manor, followed by a wave of screams. Through the blood bond, Serafina felt Nathaniel's protective instinct surge. "We need to reach the sanctuary beneath the manor," he said, moving to a bookshelf and pulling a hidden lever. "It's warded against intrusion, even by those of Lazarus's power." "And then what?" Serafina demanded. "Hide while our people die defending us?" Nathaniel turned to her, frustration evident. "We gather strength, formulate a plan." "There's no time," she insisted. "The solstice is 6 weeks away, but Lazarus won't wait that long to secure what he needs. We must act now." Through their connection, she felt his internal struggle, centuries of cautious strategy battling against the urgency of the moment. Then his resolve hardened into something new. "There is one possibility," he said slowly. "A way to complete the ritual on our terms, channeling the gatekeeper power, not to open a doorway, but to seal all pathways permanently." "At what cost?" Serafina asked, recognizing the gravity in his tone. "The blood bond must be completed in full," Nathaniel replied, his eyes holding hers. "Not the temporary connection we share now, but a permanent joining of our essences." Understanding dawned. The marriage bond, not merely symbolic, but a true blood union, he confirmed. Rare even among vampire pairs, nearly unheard of between species. It would bind us irrevocably. The implications hung in the air between them. Not just political alliance, but something far more intimate and permanent. Through their connection, Serafina sensed Nathaniel's reluctance to demand such a sacrifice, though beneath it ran a current of something that felt almost like longing. Before she could respond, the study door burst open. Ethan staggered in, his clothing torn and bloody, his eyes wild with the partial change. "Sirrah," he gasped, "we're surrounded. The Moroi, they've breached the outer defenses." Nathaniel moved with preternatural speed to secure the door behind Ethan. "How many?" "Dozens," Ethan snarled, his gaze darting suspiciously between them. "And they're not alone. Lord Rothven leads them." "The council member?" Serafina asked in shock. Lazarus's agent all along, Nathaniel confirmed grimly. I suspected as much when he pushed so insistently for our marriage. Another explosion rocked the manor, closer this time. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. We need to get Syrah out, Ethan insisted, moving protectively toward her. The pack has secured an escape route through the eastern woods. She won't be safe there, Nathaniel countered. Not while our blood bond remains active. Lazarus can track her through me. Ethan's eyes narrowed dangerously. Then perhaps we should sever that connection. Stop it, both of you, Serafina commanded, stepping between them. Ethan, Nathaniel has uncovered critical information about why the Moroi want me. We need to work together. Ethan looked unconvinced, but another explosion decided the matter for them. The manor shuddered, and flames became visible through the study windows. They're burning us out, Nathaniel observed with cold fury. Lazarus grows impatient. Serafina made her decision. The blood union, how is it performed? Both men stared at her in shock. Syrah, you can't seriously be considering, Ethan began. It's our only chance, she cut him off. If Nathaniel is right, this could end not just the current threat, but secure lasting peace between our peoples. Or it could destroy you both, Ethan argued desperately. Blood unions between vampires often kill one participant. Between different species, it's never been attempted. Then we'll be the first, Serafina said with finality. She turned to Nathaniel. How is it done? His expression was unreadable, but through their bond, she sensed a tumult of emotions. Fear for her, determination, and that same unnamed feeling she'd glimpsed earlier. The ritual requires an exchange of blood far more substantial than what we've shared, he explained. And it must be done with mutual intent, true consent from both participants. The sounds of fighting grew closer. They had minutes at most. Then we do it now, Serafina decided. Sarah, please, Ethan begged, grasping her arms. There must be another way. She touched his face gently. You've always protected me, Eth. Now I must protect everyone, including you. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You knew, didn't you? That you weren't truly my cousin. That's why you've always felt... I've loved you since we were children, he admitted roughly. Blood relation or not, you have always been my heart. And you will always be part of mine, she promised. But this is my choice, my destiny. With visible anguish, Ethan stepped back, though he remained poised to intervene. Nathaniel approached Serafina, his movements almost reverent. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Once done, this cannot be undone. Our lives will be bound until death, perhaps beyond. I'm certain, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Are you? Something shifted in his expression, the cold mask of centuries falling away to reveal an unexpected vulnerability. I have lived 300 years, believing connection was weakness, he said softly. Perhaps it is time to discover if I was wrong. Drawing the Blackwood dagger she had gifted him, Nathaniel sliced deeply across his wrist. Dark blood welled immediately, carrying the ancient power of his lineage. With my blood, I offer not dominion but partnership, he said, the ritual words emerging as if from memory. Not subjugation, but elevation. Where I end, you begin. What I am, you become. Serafina took the blade from him and made a matching cut on her own wrist. With my blood I offer not submission but strength, not obedience but alliance. Your battles become mine. Your path joins with mine until the end of all things. As their bleeding wrists pressed together, the manor around them seemed to fade into insignificance. Power surged between them, not merely the enhanced awareness of their previous bond, but something transformative and absolute. Serafina gasped as Nathaniel's centuries of memories flooded her consciousness. He trembled as her lupine essence merged with his vampiric nature. Light erupted from their joined blood, expanding outward in a shockwave that shattered the study windows. The ancient power of the gatekeepers, dormant for generations in Blackwood veins, awakened fully, not as a door to other realms, but as a seal against unwanted intrusion. In the corridor outside, inhuman screams testified to the effect on their enemies. Through their new bond, deeper and more profound than either had imagined possible, Serafina and Nathaniel shared a single thought. Together, they would face whatever came next. The manor's main doors burst open, and a figure from Nightmare entered. Lazarus, the first vampire. Ancient beyond reckoning, his withered form belied the terrible power that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "How touching," he rasped, his voice carrying despite its weakness. The wolf and the bat joined in desperation, his milky eyes fixed on their still-joined wrists. But too late, I think. Nathaniel stepped protectively in front of Serafina, though through their bond she felt no fear from him, only fierce determination. "It's over, Lazarus. The ritual you planned cannot be completed now. The gatekeeper blood is bound to mine, the power already channeled." Lazarus's laugh was like dry leaves crumbling. "Foolish child. Did you think I survived millennia without contingencies? The girl was preferred, yes, but any Blackwood will serve." His gaze shifted to Ethan. Even one whose connection to the bloodline is more distant. With a gesture of his skeletal hand, Lazarus sent Ethan crashing to his knees, dark energy coalescing around the Lycan's throat. "No!" Serafina cried, lunging forward. But in that instant, something unexpected happened. The blood union between her and Nathaniel, still new and evolving, manifested in a tangible way, their joined power extending like a shield around Ethan, repelling Lazarus's dark magic. The ancient vampire's confidence faltered visibly. "Impossible," he hissed. "The union cannot be strong enough yet to protect those we consider ours," Nathaniel finished, moving to stand shoulder to shoulder with Serafina. "Perhaps you've forgotten what true bonds can accomplish, having existed so long without any." Through their connection, Serafina felt Nathaniel's strategy form, not an attack, but a transformation. Together, they reached into the very essence of their joined blood, drawing forth the gatekeeper power, not to open doorways, but to recognize what didn't belong in their world. Lazarus was ancient, yes, but he was also corrupted, changed by centuries of congress with entities from beyond the veil. That corruption made him vulnerable to the gatekeeper's true purpose. "You are not of this world anymore," Serafina declared, her voice resonating with power beyond her years, "and what does not belong must return to its proper place." The air around Lazarus began to shimmer, reality itself seeming to reject his presence. He screamed, a sound of such ancient malice that the remaining windows in the study shattered. "This is not the end," he raged as his form began to dissolve. "There will be others, other doorways. Not in our lifetime," Nathaniel replied with cold certainty, "and perhaps not ever again." With a final terrible cry, Lazarus disintegrated, not into ash as vampires normally would, but into nothingness, as if he had never existed at all. Throughout the manor, similar cries testified to the fate of his Moroi followers. In the sudden silence, Serafina turned to Nathaniel. Their blood bond pulsed between them, no longer merely a connection, but a transformation. In his eyes, she saw flecks of amber that had never existed before. Through their bond, she felt his amazement at the lupine strength now coursing through his ancient veins. "It seems," he said with wonder, "that our union has created something entirely new. Neither fully vampire nor fully Lycan," she agreed, touching his face gently. "Something better than either alone." Ethan staggered to his feet, his expression torn between relief and heartbreak. "The manor is secured," he reported formally. "The surviving Moroi have fled, and the vampire council members who remained loyal are requesting an audience." Nathaniel nodded, though his eyes remained on Serafina. "Tell them their alpha will address them shortly, with his alpha mate at his side." When Ethan had gone, Serafina faced Nathaniel fully. "This bond, it's more than either of us expected. Indeed." His hand came up to touch the place where her blood now flowed in his veins. "I feel changed. Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. Through their bond, she felt his answer before he spoke it, not in words, but in emotions too complex for language. 3 centuries of isolation dissolving into something he had never dared to imagine. "I have lived an eternity in darkness," he said finally. "If this is light, how could I possibly regret it?" Outside, dawn was breaking over Blackthorn City. For the first time in centuries, Nathaniel did not retreat from the coming day. With Seraphina's blood mingled with his own, the sun's touch would bring warmth rather than destruction, another unexpected gift of their union. As they stood together at the shattered window, watching the sun rise on a world forever changed by their bond, Nathaniel turned to Seraphina. "The treaty my father sought to sign on the solstice, it seems inadequate now." "Then we shall write a new one," she replied. "Not between vampire and lichen as separate entities, but as peoples united through us." His fingers entwined with hers, the wounds on their wrists already healed, but the bond they created stronger than ever. "It appears, my lady, that our political arrangement has become something far more essential." "It appears so, my lord," she agreed with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time since arriving at his door. The ancient clock tower of Blackthorn City struck the hour, its chimes no longer melancholy but triumphant, marking not midnight but dawn, not an ending but a beginning. And as Nathaniel drew Seraphina closer, sealing their unprecedented bond with a kiss both tender and fierce, the last walls between their worlds crumbled into dust. What had begun as sacrifice had transformed into salvation, not just for themselves, but for all their kind. The blood of ancient enemies, freely given and joyfully received, had accomplished what centuries of treaties never could. True peace, forged in the crucible of shared destiny.